Washington's front seven is the Big Ten's most improved unit.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all day, every day today. This is going to be a really interesting show for us. For me in particular, I love to nerd out over this sort of stuff. We're talking everything to do with the front seven today. A little bit later on, we're going to go to something that is talked about in one of our exclusive interviews that you did at an NIL event with Montlake Futures and the Girl Scouts. Shout out to you, with Jacob Manu, and he might be able to play this season. We'll get to that a little bit later on. That's all you get for right now. We're going to talk about defensive tackle recruiting because, Lars, I think Washington's identified some excellent talents along the defensive line, and they also do that in the transfer portal. Not just as defensive line, but they did that with their linebacker group as well, because I don't think it's a stretch to say that Washington's front seven is the most improved unit in the Big Ten.
It really isn't, because when you threw it out to me before the show, I was thinking of well, who else in the Big Ten has really improved like a significant position, like one singular position? And you look at it maybe Oregon, but other than that, it's Washington really invested in the front seven, and especially, because you have three new linebackers, Jacob Manu, Xe'ree Alexander, and Al-Uqdah. So all three. Now, the thing is, you're not going to have all three on the field at the same time. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But more likely than not, you won't. So how that gets used and how those guys kind of impact the program in different ways is going to be intriguing. But really, it's along the defensive line where you look and you got Ty, you got Anterio Thompson, you got a healthy Zach Durfee coming back, Simote Pepa. By the way, Simote Pepa, absolutely. Again, I've probably said this 100 times already, but absolute unit. I remember when I saw Logan Sagapolu coming, I was like, oh, that's a hawk. That works. I wonder what that's going to look like with Sagapolu and Simote Pepa right next to each other, because that's a lane clogger if I've ever seen a defensive line.
So fun side note, you and I have run into a lot of these guys over the course of the last week. I remember running into Anterio Thompson at the UW basketball game, just kind of as we were walking around. I know we've talked with him too, but he was just wearing this long sleeve t-shirt, and I could tell that his biceps were bigger than my entire head. And I was like, all right, feel a lot better about that guy playing running back, or excuse me, about that guy playing defensive line. I say that because also ran into Adam Muhammad, who's just somehow gotten even bigger, and he was already just a really big dude when he got on campus. That's why I said running back. But I remember I was standing next to our good buddy Nick Lemkow of Last Word on College Sports on the sideline at the pro day, and we saw Simote Pepa come over and grab a little snack from the table, and we just kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, UW's defensive line was missing somebody like that. And it's something that you and I have talked about over the course of the offseason, where getting a guy like that from Utah, where if he's able to stay healthy and he's able to be a significant piece in the rotation, where you don't need him to do what he did in week one last season for Utah, where he played 55 snaps, got hurt, and wasn't able to do much for the next, month and a half, really, where if he's somebody who's playing 25, 30, 35 snaps a game, you're more than happy with that, because if Javon Parker is healthy, if Armand Parker is healthy, plus Bryce Butler, Alinius Davis, Anterio Thompson, Omar Khan getting in the mix, whoever else, Logan Sagapolu is trimmed down a little bit, which I'm really interested to see how he plays at a new just a little bit lighter weight. All of a sudden, that depth that you were missing, and that's without even mentioning TI Umu-Cais and Anterio Thompson, where TI is going to play inside and out a little bit. All of a sudden, we've talked about this before, but that depth that you're looking for on the interior of the defensive line is there, and that we're just rehashing that, but combining that with, as you said, three linebackers who have all accrued significant statistical accolades in their career. Two of those guys with 2 years of eligibility remaining, plus Jacob Manu, who could, we'll get to that a little later again, but with all of that, it's experience and depth and talent and physicality, where you had some physicality from your linebackers last year. We can't, we're not going to sit here and act like Carson Bruno and Alfonso Chupatala didn't bring that to the table. But with a defensive line that was really thin and just got even thinner when Javon Parker went down and when Zach Durfee went down, you don't have that issue as we sit here right now and have that discussion. And, let's say even one or two of those guys do go down for a little while. You still feel a lot better about where that unit is right now compared to what we saw last season.
Absolutely. Well, I think the important thing is you're looking at it where you bring in all the veterans, and that what it does is it basically says, okay, Elenius / Bryce / Omar Khan, you guys, we want you to take the next step, but we're not going to throw you into the fire. We're not going to say, hey, you got to be a starter. You got to be a guy now all of a sudden as a redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore. And on the other side, you're looking at the veterans thinking, well, the guys you brought in, Simote Pepa, had kind of, as you mentioned, the injury bug kind of got in the past couple of years, looks healthy now. The injury, there's no injury concern right now in that respect. And then Anterio Thompson as an interior guy, more so it sounds like, giving him the opportunity that he's been working for, right? Where he was at Iowa initially, didn't really get as much of a chance as he wanted to. Still played on special teams and had a significant impact. But this is almost like his, make right, get right. Same thing with, like Max McCree on the offensive side, where it's, hey, you were at Maryland, didn't really work out there. Make your Big Ten mark here at Washington. But one thing that really kind of intrigues me about everything you said, Xe'ree Alexander, when I talked to him about that, preseason / whatever, back in early February
thing,
he said everywhere I've gone, I've gotten better. Now, again, he went from Idaho to UCF and now to Washington. But either way, like when we're talking about being improved, you're bringing in players who have improved at every step. That's the other side of this equation, and you're pairing all of this, which is important to mention, with Ryan Walters, where last season with Steve Belichick, there was the 3-4 down front on occasion, but it was now you're going more to a 4 to 5 down front, and that's why I think pairing those two together, not saying Steve wasn't the right D coordinator, but getting the right coordinator with the personnel that you have to match and maximize the right guys in the front seven. I think it's a perfect marriage because you're looking at it and saying, okay, we have the depth, like you mentioned, but we also have the top end talent who can carry the water if need be. If let's say Elenius Davis only averages, 15 snaps a game or 12 snaps a game. That's not great. But again, keep in mind an average, you can still have a big game where you're 25 and whatever, doing stuff like that. But it's about those veteran guys. And that way you can look in Elenius Davis and Omar Khan in 27 and say, hey, now you guys are starting
26.
Or 26, because Pepa's gone.
Yeah.
Thompson will likely be gone. And you just kind of go through all those guys. And then it's a perfect transition to where you're building each one of these guys incrementally up, almost kind of like what they do at running back, where you have Jonah, Adam, and then you go to the third guy. Each one, they get increased reps as they go along.
So I really like where you're going with that. One thing I want to mention is you mentioned the veterans. That's why we haven't brought up, Zayjas Rainey-Solid, Jonathan Epperson, Donovan Robinson, or any of these young freshmen along the defensive line, because the veterans are what's going to really impact this group. And one thing, when you talk about Xe'ree Alexander, it's another discussion I know we're rehashing for all the airs, but it's something that matters a lot, is the fact that he's a guy who can play inside and maybe outside linebacker a little bit, where we're probably not going to see. You made a significant investment at the position, which was the right thing to do. But with the way this defense is, it's a 5-1-5 is what you're going to see most of the time, where 5-1-5 or 3-2-1-5, it's a little bit easier to just say 5-1-5 with two outside linebackers, 3 defensive linemen, 1 inside linebacker, and 5 in the secondary. So one of the ways you can maximize that investment that you made at the inside linebacker position is by just cross-training somebody and making somebody, the Alfonso Tupatala or the Kamori House of last season, where he plays outside and in. And I think that Xe'ree is the perfect guy to do that, because when you look at what Buddha and what Jacob Manu do best, it's really fly around and are able to just play the whole field and see everything really well and come downhill, where Xe'ree does that really well. But with his size and his physicality, why not use that guy as an edge setter every once in a while? And if he's able to just cut a tackle off, you can have whoever's playing the nickel come in, or a safety walk down. There are a lot of different ways that you can work this defense. And it's just a unit that I'm really excited to get out and watch during spring practice. And Lars, there are some defensive tackles that I think you and I were very, very right on. We'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. When it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team. plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on, and the FanDuel app is so simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Lars, I said there are some defensive tackles we were very right on. There is nobody in this class that I am more intrigued with than TI Umu-Cais, where we talked about this when we got his offer. I remember watching his film and saying, this dude is the number 4 ranked player in Colorado. I'm kind of stunned by this. In the latest 247 Sports update, he's now the number 1 player in Colorado. And this is somebody that Washington did a great job of identifying the talent in that player. Now you're getting him on an official visit. His other ones set up are UCLA, Stanford, and Colorado State. And this is a position that's really important for the future of of not just the position, but of Washington's defense as a whole moving forward into the Big Ten. And I think they're in a really great spot with him.
They are, and I will say it is kind of surprising to not see Texas as in the mix or scheduling an official visit yet. Like that is kind of the surprise, and I wonder how much of that is Washington saying, hey, like, let's kind of make those inroads really quick, because when they made that offer, they hadn't talked to him. And then now less than 2 months later, you get an official visit. Like that to me says like this staff was like, oh, wait, we're not late per se, because UNC had still hadn't offered yet. There was a bunch of other schools that have offered since then. Yeah. But that was why Washington timing that was so important, because if you wait like another month or two, now you're really playing catch up. And the fact that you're able to get him up for an official, like, this is a guy where we always say, like, the mountain regions, you need to get a couple of guys. Where you talk about Roger Rosengard along the offensive line. There's a few other guys they've been able to get out of Utah and Colorado, but this is one where you look at the other list of schools that he's got official visits to, like Colorado State.
Yeah, just Stanford, UCLA, Colorado State, yeah.
Yeah, and so now, again, Stanford obviously, did take Uiagaleilei, as we mentioned on yesterday's show, but yeah. I don't feel as much of a threat there as I just look at that. I look at those schools and I'm thinking, Washington got the best case to make, and now it's just a matter of getting him on campus and really impressing him. But I know for a fact I remember when I talked to him, he was like, I want to do my homework, I want to find out. Clearly, the homework came back great, because he's like, I want to get up there as quickly as possible. And I think I had initially thought Texas was the school to beat. Now I wonder if Washington's the school to beat.
I think I'm with you there, where it's something that, of course, Uiagaleilei goes to Stanford right after a week or two ago when we talked about TI being at this stage in his recruitment saying, hey, that's a battle Washington usually wins. So this is why when I say I don't make predictions, that is exactly why, because I jinx things. Another guy that I'm really intrigued to talk about, because I love everything you said there, where I think he's a really advanced player in terms of what he brings to the table right now as a pass rusher, where I think he uses his hands really well. And at 6'4", 307, he's got great size. He moves really well, where I'm usually of the just mindset of don't play offensive and defensive linemen as true freshmen unless they show you something rare and the ability to hang physically, because it's just so hard to move from high school to college and just adapt physically right away. But this is somebody who might make a case because of just how advanced he is in some of those areas. Another guy that I think is really worth highlighting is another guy who set an official visit. We didn't really get a chance to talk about him in depth yesterday, and that's Dakota Dickson from Monte Vista.
Yeah, Monte Vista, where we talk about Danville, right? Former home of Jake Haener, former home of Peyton Henry, former home of a few other Huskies. And so, again, obviously a little bit different situation here. But that Landon seems to be one where it's or Dakota, sorry, not Landon, sorry. I had to confuse the names there. Where Dakota seems like one where he's got some other schools in the mix, so I'll be curious to see if because now we're talking about, we're thinking probably 560 linemen in this class, roughly, give or take, depending on what the number ends up being. Right now, I would put it like a decent. Yeah, Washington's a decent shot. I'm just curious, like, are some of these guys going to say, hey, should we all team up at Washington? Or, because again, when we're talking about defensive linemen, especially on the West Coast, it's, they're very prized assets. And it's, obviously a person isn't an asset, but just, in terms of recruiting and talking about their on-field and things like that, it's a guy where I wouldn't be surprised if he commits to Washington, but I could also see, some other schools saying, hey, there might be some more playing time because, as we just mentioned in last segment, you have Omar Khan, you have Dominic McCone, you have a bunch of other young, defensive linemen here. How many guys can you load up with? And then at the same time say, well, hey, maybe I want to go try this other school first. But I think either way, the fact that Washington's in the mix for a lot of these guys is, I think, the telltale sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Where let's run through his other official visits. It's Arizona State, it's Cal, it's SMU. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who works in recruiting, who gave me a little bit of a breakdown on him and said he is a really intriguing player. He's somebody that, obviously a lot of schools where he's got 20 plus offers, I believe is the number last time I checked, that are 19. Excuse me, I have it right here, where there are a lot of schools in pursuit of him, obviously, because of not only just what his ceiling is at 6'4", 280 pounds, but because of the athleticism that he brings to the table, where he's somebody who is really explosive on the interior and hasn't even tapped into everything that he can do at the position, where I'm just really curious to see what Washington's development plan would be for somebody like that. And in a similar mindset where a guy I really like that I'm curious to see if they're able to get him up on an official visit where he was here for the junior day is Malik Brooks from Southern California. I'm a huge fan of his game, and he's somebody where Alabama's in the mix, Georgia's in the mix, where he's got those offers. We don't know how hard they're pushing at this point in time, but that's something that still looks good if he ends up at Washington.
And that is exactly to the point of what I was kind of getting at, where you just want to be in the discussion. You want to be in the mix, either getting officials or, being in that top 5, 6 column for a lot of these guys, and let them sort the board out. Or, not that Washington doesn't have any power in that, but just you want to be in the mix for all those guys. So if one ends up kind of starting to feel more towards another school, you're not playing catch up with anybody else. You already have the offers on the table. You already have guys come up for unofficial visits. And so now it's just, okay, this guy's kind of slipping down. We're going to put this guy up. This guy's going up. We're going to put him down. But you're already in the mix. And I mean, again, what is he? 6'4"? Yeah, 6'4", 312. Like there's a lot you can do with that. And I'm sure everyone's going to say 3-star, 3-star, 3-star. Again, the amount. Look at all the schools coming west for this 3-star talent, people. Like
exactly.
That SMU is one where, like, hello, like the irony of the Pony Express back in the day. They were killed for something you're doing now perfectly well. But it's a fact. We've seen SMU be a threat to Washington, where there was the D lineman out of California that you liked that I think committed and then ended up signing somewhere else. It was I'm
totally blanking on it.
It was like Chine something. I forgot his last name, but there was
SMU.
Yeah, but SMU has been a player. So when you say like he's got an official visit there, like those are the schools that I'm concerned more about than Cal and Stanford, because certain guys will go to Stanford. There's just like that's a separate category completely. But other than that, I mean, Kenny Dillingham at ASU, that's a tough one because again you're selling the CFP, and that's again why all of this is so important for Jedd to say, hey, well, we're in the CFP mix. It's like, yeah, but you didn't make the CFP yet. Like UW did, but not you. And that's not a slight to Jedd, but it's once Jedd cracks the CFP, even if it's a second round appearance, that's all that matters. And then you go next 26 and say, hey, now we want to be in the semifinals competing for the national championship because our guys are a year older. The perfect lead-in to do it.
I absolutely agree with you. Where it's one of those things where he's not, one of the reasons I don't think he's rated very highly is because he's a big body that hasn't really developed much as a pass rusher as of right now, because he's just big and physical and he can bull rush on basically every play and win at the high school level. So you don't necessarily see a lot of that. And it's why some of these defensive linemen out west, I don't think are getting the same, treatment that guys down south or in the Southeast really are coveted in the same light, because that's just something that I think some of those high school coaches are a little bit more used to seeing. But one more guy that I want to get to, whose ranking has kind of fluctuated a little bit in terms of 247 Sports, where he dropped down to a 3-star, is another guy who's on campus over the weekend, and that's James Carrington from Crean Lutheran High School, where he's got official visits set up to Oklahoma and LSU, again, on campus for Washington's junior day, and is a very unique body type, where he's a little bit on the shorter side to play on the interior, where he's 6'2". I know he's listed at 240. I think I saw somewhere he was up to somewhere around 255 pounds. A really explosive player from the interior, a lot like Dakota Dickson, just has a very unique body type. And he's one of those guys where, you think about collapsing the pocket from the interior where let's just use Voit Tanufi as a comp, who just had another unique body type for the position. I think that he's somebody that Washington might be a sleeper and in play for as of this point in time, because he's the kind of guy where you talk about defensive line depth really wins championships. Look at Ohio State, look at Michigan over these last couple of years. He's that kind of guy that can give you that.
Yeah, and it's a guy where there's a unique projectable body, projectable mold. Like you mentioned, 6'2", 240 doesn't necessarily scream interior, or it doesn't scream that much. But I think it's also there's some athleticism there that you can kind of tap into and take advantage of. And right, yeah, I didn't mean to undersell it there. But the point being that there's a high ceiling, and so. Yes. The guys, we've seen them take, Victor Sanchez-Hernandez, guys where it's like, hey, there might not be an impact for a year or two, but by year 3 and 4, or year 2, 3, and 4, then we'll really start to see it once they're in the college weight program and things like that. So I think James Carrington kind of fall in that mold.
No, I absolutely agree. And Lars, we got to the future. Now, as we look back into the present, I know that's a weird way to say that, but it's a fun one, I think, for the time being. Jacob Manu has the ability to change Washington's defense this year. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Lars, shameless plug for ourselves here and for your spectacular interviewing skills. You were at U Village a couple weekends ago and got a chance to talk with Jacob Manu, who is recovering from a torn ACL that he suffered during the 2024 season and has been a little bit back and forth where he's not really sure what the plan is. That's what he told me at the media day in February. He's told Scott Eklund, hey, I might redshirt. Hey, I might play. Depends on how I feel. He told you he might be on track to play this year.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with Derby, where it's like, hey, spring camp, don't look at it, don't consider it, don't count on it. But fall camp, when everything actually matters, and by the way, after another summer with the strength staff, that I think is important, where you're not pushing him. And to Scott's point and your point, yeah, he could redshirt and he could, he's a luxury in that respect, because that's also why you went and got 2 other linebackers. But it's a good problem to have where you look and say he can still play 4 games in redshirt, or 5 theoretically, I guess. Well, Giles Jackson predicted 7. Yeah. Giles Jackson predicted to be 7 in slow redshirt. But either way, the point being that it's a good problem to have, where if you end up getting to the season and you get through fall camp, it's like, oh yeah, we really need to play Jacob. Yeah, this is the thing. Cool, great. And then you can use Buddha or Xe'ree in different roles and things like that. If Jacob isn't physically ready to go, which at this point I would be surprised, unless there's a significant setback over the summer, which again, that would be a separate issue. But the way that, he was kind of moseying around, it didn't seem limited and all. But in terms of being on field, there's a huge difference between walking around and actually playing and chasing after guys. So in that respect, that's why I'm glad that he said, hey, I'll be ready by the start of fall camp or by fall camp. Who said that last year? Jedd, about Landon, when it was like, hey, he'll be ready by the start of fall camp. But it wasn't exactly the start, but it was enough to where he was in the rotation by the second week. And okay, we'll see how it goes. And so you can test it out. And I think I said it on the show where it's like the Ohio State game might end up being the end all be all in terms of, hey, like if we use all these guys right now, this is going to be the game where it's, hey, we're going or we're not going. And I think that's it's an early indicating sign. But I think also having his veteran presence as the 2-time captain at Arizona, that's something that X or Buddha, and I don't know if Buddha was the captain at Wazoo. I could be wrong on that. But I just think, but I think of the two, I would probably lean more towards Manu as being the captain of the linebackers, and you can't replace that on the field. You can't, there's a certain leadership element to where you're especially setting up the front 7 and things like that. So I'll be curious to see how much can Jacob pick up the Ryan Walters scheme off the field in terms of, implementing it, doing everything like that. So when he hits the field in fall camp, he's all ready to go. And then that'll, kind of just determine everything from there.
So I'm with you where I like that you call it a luxury because in a sense it is, right? Where, a couple guys we haven't mentioned are Devin Bryant and Hayden Moore. Whereas somebody we asked Carson Bruner about him at the pro day and he was like, yeah, watch out for those guys. Obviously, they were right behind me and it's really nice too. Because Carson said he worked out with Devin Bryant over part of the winter when they were both down in California for a small period of time. And those are guys that need to be factored into this equation as well, right? Where we spent a lot of time talking about the improvements, the investments we made at the position because they were certainly needed. But having that kind of depth is really important at the position. And having somebody like Jacob Manu, who is just so much fun to watch when he comes downhill, where, yeah, he's undersized for the position, but he doesn't play like it. He doesn't play like someone who's tentative where, I mean this in the most respectful way possible, where Ben Burke-Kirven played a lot like an undersized linebacker, where he wasn't always aggressively coming downhill against the run and blowing up blocks and knocking offensive linemen on their butts. That's something that Jacob Manu does, and you can go watch that in his film where Ben Burke-Kirven was a rangy sideline-to-sideline linebacker who was really great at wrapping up and tackling in space, which was awesome, and you need that. Jacob Manu can do that too, but Jacob Manu is also the kind of guy who, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about what CJ Christian, what Alex McLaughlin, what McEllisteen, and a lot of these other safeties can bring as run defenders. Jacob Manu is somebody who can take on an offensive lineman in open space and not be immediately overpowered. And again, these are things he shows on film. I'm not just saying that because he's just a strong dude. So that's something that is very, very valuable to a defense where Buda Al-Uqdah and Xe'ree Alexander are both strong players that have their own set of skills. And I think Xe'ree with his size is maybe a little bit better at it than Buda is, but Jacob Manu just is really, really good in that regard. And that's something that is so valuable to a defense where a little bit earlier when I'm talking about using Xe'ree as an outside linebacker at different points in time, in times when you're thinking about what Ryan Walters might be able to do, that's something that Jacob Manu brings to the table that very few other linebackers, I think in the Big Ten, are able to do. So I'm curious to see if he does get on the field, if that's something that you want to do, because again, the theme of the show has been getting stronger and getting bigger in the front seven. And that's something that Jacob Manu absolutely brings to the table.
Yeah, and it's also a case of one of those guys is going to end up having to make an impact on special teams. And so it changes the defense, but also helps and improves the health of the program. When you're looking at all the weaknesses that they had in special teams last year, and maybe Jacob ends up, going back and being a gunner on some things and just kind of getting him some reps, getting him, game speed, right? That necessarily wouldn't surprise me. But it's a good problem to have if you're Washington to say, who do we use and how do we use them instead of how do we manage this? How do we figure out how to have a presence at linebacker? And I think also it's worth noting the experience of Jacob and all these guys, and then bringing in Brian Odom as your new inside linebackers coach. I think have his experience as the previous defensive play caller, all the stops that he's had at Missouri, USC, et cetera. That's the guy where I wonder how much could he also improve these guys? Where you look at Jacob Manu had what? Johnny Nansen in Arizona?
Yeah.
Then I don't want to go down that road, but
he was good. Yeah. No, please continue. Yeah, no, he was good and he was productive.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is you're getting surefire production, and then you just have to piece it all together. How many snaps do you end up getting some of these guys? But if Jacob ends up playing over 5 games this season, I think it'll be a worthwhile investment for Washington because on the flip side of it is, well, in 26 you have Xe'ree, you have Jonathan Epperson, you have Hayden Moore, you have potentially Devin Martin, you have a bunch of these guys. You have X actually coming back. X could come back for another year as well. And so
as could Buda.
Yes, and so I think that more so is I think all 3 of those guys are going to understand if Jacob ends up playing, and I just say if because again, it's March 13th, so don't quote me on this, but it's just one of those where if I wouldn't be surprised if Jacob plays the whole season, as once he's healthy coming out of fall camp. And for me, that's okay, cool. Jacob will, carry that Carson, Bruner, Alfonso, hey, I'm going to go off to the NFL. And then Buda and X can come back for another year in 26 and say, cool, Jacob showed us how to do it. We'll show Xe'ree how to do it. We'll show Epperson how to do it. And it's a perfect kind of segue up to where next year you don't have to go back into the portal for a couple more linebackers. You have them all on the roster. Whereas this year it was kind of a unique situation of, crap, we lost both of them. We need to go find some people. And,
and then you lose your top backup too in Kamori House. Yeah.
Oh, tragic. That was ridiculous.
So I like where you're going with that, because I think that's a really great just encapsulation of what Jedd's program is supposed to be. And I don't say that as somebody who's just like, oh yeah, this is, like as a mouthpiece for the program or anything, but it's something that he has described to us plenty of times, where we don't want to build our program through the transfer portal. We want to build it through high school recruiting and supplement where need be. We're right now at linebacker. That's exactly what you need, because you and I were on this show in the middle of December where it's, oh, hey, if Kamori House and Xe'ree Alexander are starting linebackers next year, that seems fine. It's a fine young foundation to build, because who else started as a freshman for Jedd Fisch? Jacob Manu, where that's something that we have seen in the past from Jedd, from his program. And while, that obviously ended up working out pretty well for him, you don't need that to be the case right now, where you can take a couple of experienced guys and have them just kind of continue to build up the foundation of the program for those young guys, where I still hold by where Xe'ree could be a true freshman that could burn his redshirt because of the physicality and because of the speed that he plays with. Those are all things that are still very possible. But now, again, you used the term luxury a few minutes ago. That's why this is a luxury, because now you don't need to rush that guy. You don't need to rush Jonathan Epperson, who still needs to put on a little bit of weight, just from what he came in at. You don't need to rush somebody like Donovan Robinson, who still, might be around for spring practice if he's able to enroll at the end of March, early April, somewhere around that period in time. We'll see how that works out. But you don't need to rush that guy, who is a really nice physical player, because it's, hey, we're really comfortable with the guys we already have in the room. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.